For many of us, music plays an important role in our lives. The emotional highs and lows of music we're attached to, the late night introspection or nostalgic track that brings back a flood of memories from our childhood. I have the Skyrim soundtrack playing in the background for a reason. For those that played Skyrim when we were younger, listening to it now does exactly that. It floods us with memories and a bunch of nostalgia. More than that though, the Skyrim soundtrack remains one of the most influential of all time because it perfectly merges the gameplay of Skyrim, the open world of Skyrim, and of course the player's emotions and desires while playing Skyrim. It flawlessly blends all three of those together for an unforgettable experience, one that's not possible without the work of Jeremy Soule. And you know, speaking of merging gameplay and music flawlessly, let me introduce you to the Roboquest soundtrack. It's got a lot. We've got that heavy shit. We've got that fast shit. We've got that hype shit. We've got that wacky shit. And we've got that 0 to 100 shit. I'm sorry for that harsh transition between soundtracks, but I promise there's a point to this. Music in Roboquest is used in various ways, but I know it for one thing and one thing only. To get me hyped to shoot some fucking robots, and it does that emphatically. That said, I won't sit here and ignore the elements of complexity or depth. Roboquest's music is dynamically used in the interim rooms before you open the door to the next level, so you'll sit there trying to time the drop to perfection as you open the door. Also, despite the emphasis on fast-paced EDM bangers, Roboquest's composer in Noise Cream still manages to make you feel relevant emotions depending on the context of the level you're on. Take this for example, this is part of the final stretch of a run. You're so close to making it to the end and you're hyped to be this close, so the music makes you feel it through higher pitched and brighter notes. I'm sitting here writing this like I'm a fucking composer when I know nothing about music theory, but this song makes me feel happy and ready at the same time, so I think it's effective. Then there's this one, a part in the run where shit's getting real. It's overrun with difficult enemies, there are multiple bosses to take down, and it all takes place over a wide cityscape. Therefore, Noise Cream uses a darker tone in the track. In fact, the one word I'd probably use to describe this track the best is daunting. Music in Roboquest plays a critical role as it did in Skyrim. In my opinion, it is not a stretch to say that it is as much a part of this game as the gunplay and movement are. You flow through each area with the music in the background, you hit head after head after head, your aim assisted by the drums, egging you on. I fucking love this soundtrack and I have to make sure you know the person behind it. Noise Cream. Go to his Spotify and show some love, because this game would not be the same without his efforts. I seriously appreciate it if you stuck around to listen to music I've wanted to share in this format for so long, and if you haven't heard of Roboquest or figured it out by now, this is a fast-paced first-person shooter roguelite with an emphasis on slick movement and satisfying gunplay. You should understand the motions of an FPS roguelite by now, room to room, level to level, shooting bad guys and bagging upgrades, but Roboquest stands out alongside Deadlink as one of the only FPS roguelites I've played that understands the basic fucking assignment of actually making FPS mechanics feel good. I love Gunfire Reborn, but that shit pales in comparison to Roboquest and Deadlink in mechanical feel. The acceleration of the movement is perfect, the ground slide is close to ideal speed, and jumping feels powerful and useful. Mid-air control is balanced so you're not turning on a dime, but control is still granted if you need to dodge bullets mid-air. The best part about what I just mentioned is that that's the basic fundamental package, and while it feels phenomenal, it's just the tip of the iceberg. As you progress and complete quests and unlocks, more movement tech options open up, like jetpacks, grappling hooks, and more. The entire movement package is sublime, and throughout the levels there are rails to grind on and jump pads to utilize for even more fun. All I can imagine when thinking about the effort that went into this mechanic is a developer that's sitting at their desk tirelessly changing numerical values and moving sliders up and down until they had the exact numbers that they were looking for. Mwah, I love it. Good shit, Rise Up Studios, you absolutely nailed it. And if they were developers chipping away at the numbers for movement, then you can bet they were doing the exact same thing for gunplay, because it feels euphoric to shoot in this game. Unlike with movement though, gunplay is the sum of a few more parts than just the shooting. Sound design stands out to me with crit, hit, and weapon sound effects adding up to reward accuracy and provide you with that dopamine hit. Visual effects within Roboquest err on the simpler side, but that doesn't stop them from feeling any less satisfying. Simple effects often mean you can visualize and understand what's happening on screen much better, and in the case of Roboquest, that's true and effective within gunplay. Then there's everything else that happens when you shoot your gun, that I can only describe as the tactility of shooting in Roboquest. The link that you have as a person between the game and your hand on your mouse. That connection is felt in Roboquest, and it is so authentic and so true to great FPS mechanics, and I just love it so much. Okay, so movement and shooting, those are the most important things that make Roboquest as enticing as it is to play, but this game does have meta progression and some decent in-run progression too. We'll start with the meta progression. During runs, you'll acquire wrenches, which is the currency used to upgrade the classic kind of rogue-lite skill tree, except this is less skill tree and more standard upgrade board. On its own, it's not bad, and it fits in nicely with the other forms of meta progression, but as is the same in other games that employed this method, it's begun to feel a little bit stale, and generally I'm looking for lateral forms of meta progression to complement the linear progression, especially on a skill tree like this that we've seen time and time again. I do think my opinion might be warped though by the fact that this has been in the game since day dot early access and not much has changed, but for someone that didn't play early access, their opinion may differ from mine. Quests and their permanent rewards are another form of meta progression, and initially I wasn't a huge fan of the specific requirements, but then as I continued to play, well, it turns out the requirements are incredibly achievable. These quests are how you get access to movement items like the jetpack along with a few other gadgets. The gadget system is another system that has been chopped and changed around since early access, and it ends up being a system that doesn't negatively affect gameplay, but it certainly has more potential that I don't think is quite realized in its current state. The final large form of meta progression with an impact on gameplay are these crystals. These crystals are obtained through completing specific hidden stages or challenges, and their primary use is to make the final level of the game easier. So something like reducing the final boss's overall health. There are 6 of these in total, and it's a nice goal to have to go and grab all of these throughout your playtime. There is also the museum, which is essentially a large logbook of data that you've collected on the game's items, weapons, and enemies. Weapons and enemies will require a certain amount of enemies to be killed to unlock their slot in the museum, while items and gadgets will have their entry unlocked on the first pickup. Completing the museum is a requirement for the 100%, so good luck. One issue that some people might have with Roboquest is the enemy aesthetic and behavior. I mentioned this when I first covered this game on the channel, and my opinion hasn't altered too much. Robots as enemies is a surefire way for them to lose all personality as adversaries, especially without adding anything to give them personality. Whereas in other games, giving the enemies some sort of personality or unique contextual visual style or recognizable behavior patterns is a fantastic way to motivate players to continue their rampage, or at least give the players a feeling of impact on every kill. This problem persists into a different area of enemy design that does slightly frustrate me. As stellar as it feels to kill shit in this game, Roboquest is no Doom when it comes to killing enemies in creative ways. Generally, the robots either have a crit spot that's exposed or not, and that pattern doesn't really change barring shields from time to time. Combine that with the lack of personality, and the robots feel more like cannon fodder than anything else, but maybe that's what Rise Up was going for, and if that's the case, I can't really blame them. To Rise Up's credit though, the robots' attacks are quite varied, and understanding which ones will be more detrimental to you creates some sort of target priority in your mind over extended playtime, and that's great. The robots are a threat in Roboquest, don't get me wrong, and thankfully killing them feels great, like I said, due to the gunplay and movement, but for some people I can totally understand if the insipid robots don't do it for them. Luckily, the bosses in Roboquest have a little bit more going for them. These bosses don't ooze personality, but their unique arenas and movesets do that for them. The boss fights in Roboquest are where every element I've mentioned previously combine for an awesome experience, and the creativity of the arenas and boss design really does put the developer's talent on display. There is something to be said about what the boss fights offer versus what could have been done to spice up other areas in the game, and while the boss fights don't make up for a lack of charisma elsewhere, it definitely makes these fights stand out a lot more as a highlight of what Roboquest has in store for its players. I'd like to finish this review by talking about the in-run progression, but I recognize that that leaves out conversations about the visual style of Roboquest, its story, and the variety in something as important as the weapons you'll use every single run. So look, Roboquest's story is short and cute, and nothing else. It's not something that even the most hardcore story lovers will go on about. You are here to kill robots, okay? This is not Hades. The cel-shaded visuals will of course bring up comparisons to Borderlands, which does nothing but favors Roboquest. It's a simple and effective visual style, nothing more to say. And the variety in weapons is stellar, as you would expect. I'm not sure why I've decided to not discuss in depth the volume of weapons at your disposal. I think it's just something that I felt wasn't super important to me, but yes, each weapon is awesome and has its own pros and cons, and the general feel from the community is that each weapon is pretty viable, so that's also pretty sweet. Okay, in-run progression. We'll start with the 6 playable classes in Roboquest: the Guardian, Commando, Ranger, Recon, Engineer, and Elementalist. They each have unique perks and abilities that can be upgraded, and these choices will shape the kind of power you have during a run. I, for one, am a fan of what each class offers, even if at times it feels a little simple and could probably benefit from more intricate design. Despite that, the in-run upgrades for your class specifically, which are presented to you on level up, do a good job at not only being decently powerful, but also providing clear build paths to think about. Simple but effective synergies also exist with the universal upgrades to things like critical and elemental damage. The most obvious example is the benefit the Elementalist gets from the universal flat elemental damage upgrade path combined with their own elemental buffs. These synergies feel fun and are presented in a straightforward manner, and it's one of the reasons every level up feels like it makes you that much more powerful. The other huge source of power comes from your guns, which can be tinkered with in a variety of ways. Upgrade their level, reroll their affixes, increase their rarity, or add a special affix to them. As you progress, you'll unlock all of these options and more, and this is probably a good time to mention the interim rooms in Roboquest. They are there for doing everything except killing robots. They are filled to the brim with all sorts of ways to power up during runs, as you unlock the different vendors and options through the upgrade tree or quests. In these rooms, you'll also have ample opportunity to pick up some items, which have all sorts of effects, ranging from basic flat damage increases to super specific situational items. Take the police whistle, for example, one of the most dog shit items I've seen in a roguelike ever. Essentially, it means I get a buff for a brief 12 seconds when opening doors, so what might be like 24 to 36 seconds total over a 4 to 5 minute level. What the fuck? Why I would ever spend my hard-earned power cells on this is beyond me, but luckily the majority of items do actually offer useful buffs. Either way, that's a pretty brief rundown of in-run progression, but I have a thought that I'd like to know if other people who've played Roboquest share. Excluding the level ups, which genuinely feel great, most of the other in-run progression options, like the weapon upgrades, items, etc., they feel pretty stale. Like they exist to give the player choice, but they don't feel entirely impactful. Essentially what I'm saying is that while obviously upgrading your gun's level and picking up items with a clear benefit do help your run objectively, over time, to me personally, their impact has felt a little bit lost, and their choice feels more like yes or no rather than anything more. I struggle to articulate that a little bit, but to reiterate, that's my personal experience, and yours could be completely different. The beauty of Roboquest lies in the strong elements that I started this video with: music, gunplay, and movement. Not much else in Roboquest is objectively negative, and most of the design choices will impact different players in different ways. While the latter half of this video has leaned more into explanation and criticism, I want to make it abundantly clear that the positives in Roboquest absolutely decimate whatever objective or subjective negatives the game may have. I have returned to this game time and time again because its core gameplay is fucking excellent, and I highly recommend it to you off that assessment alone. I very much appreciate you watching. Hope you have a great day. Check out the Twitch stream, link in the description. I'll see you later.
What the fuck was that?